What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Dude Hine Show. Today is March 22nd, 2022, and there's been some, big Bengals news the last few days. And joining me in today's video is host of the unofficial Bengals podcast. I have Frank Laplaca joining me today. How you doing today, Frank?
All right, Jordan. I'm excited to talk some Bengals with you today.
You've been on my show a lot these past couple of months. As we were in the postseason, we even made it to the Super Bowl, and there's been so many, free agency moves the Bengals have made these past couple of weeks. Obviously, we've signed some big guys in the offensive line, like Ted Terrace, a center from New England. We also signed, right guard Alex Kappa. But then we, this past week on Sunday, we signed the biggest free agent yet, and we ended up signing right tackle Lyle Collins, a signing that Bengal fans have been wanting us to make so badly, and we ended up making the deal to a 3-year contract. The first 2 years are a 2 years worth $20 million. Bengal fans are so happy about this move. So, Frank, what's kind of your thoughts and reactions toward the Bengals signing right tackle Lyle Collins?
I'll tell you, first off, this is what I said on my podcast. I love the NFL. You could follow it all year round, especially the fact that the Bengals went into the Super Bowl. So here we were, busy with Bengal football through January, halfway through February. A couple weeks go by, and now we're seeing all these free agent signings. Next month, it's going to be all focused on the draft. Before you know it, there's OTAs, training camp, mini camp, preseason game. It's just very exciting to follow this sport, and I'm glad there's really been no downtime in this off season because we went so far. So to answer your question, Lyle Collins, that's a massive pickup for us. And I know in the last episode, I expressed some concern that he had a hip injury in 2020, which required surgery. Sometimes those are kind of long-term injuries. But if you look at his production last year, I know he sat out a handful of games with a suspension. But when he came back, he was the Lyle Collins from the old days. So it looks like I think he's 29 years old, if I'm not mistaken. It looks like he's a player, kind of right in the middle of his prime here. And it's going to be a big addition because we were worried. We were talking last episode, how are we going to fix this right tackle position? And they did. And if you look at what they did with Kappa, Karras, and with Collins, all those guys are around for 3 years. Kappa's 4 years. But, if you think of the next 3 years, we're going to have 3 very solid offensive linemen. Hopefully Jonah becomes the Jonah that we want. We've talked about that before too. And, I guess as this show goes on, we'll talk about left guard a little bit. But if you look at the 3 guys they signed, especially Collins, that's big time. And I saw some footage of him pancaking guys in the run game. And I read that he only let up like 4 sacks over the last few seasons. And it's exactly what we need. And the way he comes into town is telling Joe Burrow, your new bodyguard is Jordan, you with me? I think I might have cut out, but I was rambling a little bit, so it worked out.
I hear you. I hear you now. Yeah, you cut out there for about 30 seconds or so. You talked about Collins talking about, bodyguard towards Burrow. Then after that, you kind of cut out.
You know what? That's a good point to end on with this. I just love the swag that he comes into town with, and to assure our franchise quarterback, hey, you're not going to get beat up like you did the last few years, at least not on my watch.
And you mentioned we talked about this last week, and it was really throughout this whole offseason, there's been lots of different talks about what, linemen the Bengals will get, different positions. And in my opinion, when you look at our offensive line group, at all of our offensive line positions, my major question mark was who was going to be right tackle. And as we head into the 2022 season, our best offensive lineman is a right tackle. It works out so great for us. And it's, like I said before the show, I thought we were going to get him, but it's just now it seems real. It's just like the realization of it, kind of like how we were in the Super Bowl. You hear it, but until it actually happens, you just don't really believe it, I guess. But, we have Lyle Collins now, a guy who is one of the better right tackles in the league, along with Alex Kappa, who like a 4-year deal. Ted Karras, when you look at this Bengals offensive line this past season, it was top 3 worse in the NFL, worse in the division. you can make a case right now the Bengals have the best offensive line in the division now, with the best quarterback in their division, and along with many other position groups. And this is one of those things that's great about it. It's not like it's a one-year deal. I mean, if you get it for 1 year, it's good you have him, but you're kind of still in that same situation 1 year from now. Kind of like when we signed Riley Reeve this past year. It wasn't a bad signing, but here we are searching for a right tackle up until we signed Collins. The fact that it's a 3-year deal is great because, I mean, we have these guys that, center, right guard, and right tackle locked up for 3 years. Jonah Williams, you mentioned, hopefully he can, play to his first-round caliber, what he's capable of. But it's crazy because, I mean, now the, talk goes to the left guard, what's going to happen there. But, I mean, when you have Collins, a guy who had an 82 PFF grade, like you said, only gave up 4 sacks these last couple years. When you look at the Bengals, like our best offensive line gave up like 4 sacks this past year. And it's so crazy. It's like we haven't really lost anybody big. I mean, from this past season, we are somehow a team who was in the Super Bowl and basically 1 second away when you look at Burrow getting hit. Chase was wide open. 1 second away from winning the Super Bowl. Our roster is better, which is super, super hard to say for a team who was in the Super Bowl. But for us, for how much money we've been able to spend and help our offensive line protect Joe Burrow now, we're better than last year. And it's a good feeling that we have a chance to be in the Super Bowl for these next couple of seasons.
100%. And I believe that's – I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's part of the Joe Burrow effect is that we're able to bring in guys like this. The big-ticket free agents want to come here because they see the potential with Joe Burrow. And I do agree. I think we're building one of the best offensive lines in the AFC North right now. Pittsburgh is in shambles. Baltimore's in transition. I mean, the Browns have a good offensive line, but they did just get rid of their center. So, there's a lot to that statement, and I think we're in a really good spot. I'm actually excited to talk about the left guard possibilities, which I guess we'll do a little bit later in the show.
Yeah, I was actually typing about that right now. We'll go ahead and talk about that. And I'm bringing Chili here. Says, am I crazy to assume this line could be top 10 if we bring back Spain? And it's one of those things, kind of like how I was talking about Johnson for the show. It's like you think about it, and you kind of you already have an opinion on it before you really start thinking about it. But the more you deep dive into it, like something like this, I don't think it's that crazy because I think Spain is a little bit underrated. I kind of said it a couple of times. Collins is one of the better right tackles. Ted Karras is good. Alex Cap is good. Williams has shown potential. And it's crazy. But I said, I think last week, last season, Jonah Williams was not as good as he should have been, but he was probably our second best offensive lineman. We're heading into the 2022 season. Jonah Williams is probably our worst offensive lineman. And that's not saying Williams is bad, but that just goes to show how good this offensive line group has quickly changed just these past couple months. I think it could be top 10. I don't think it's that crazy. So what are your thoughts on that comment?
Well, if Jonah Williams pans out like we want him to, and we have a lot of possibilities for left guard and the new 3 free agents, of course, I'm always going to side with the Bengals and be optimistic, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think that they're going to be a top 10 offensive line. I guess with the coaching with Frank Pollock, that should make a big difference. And there's also a little bit of a learning curve when, you throw 3 guys from brand new from different teams together and have them mesh, but there's so much time. Like I don't think we could use that as an excuse. Like, oh, it's going to take these guys a season before they even get to really know each other. No, they practice enough. They study enough. They watch film. They're pros. They're veterans. I think they're all going to be able to gel fairly quickly. It's not going to be this big learning curve of, 3 dissimilar guys not gelling.
And, you mentioned Frank Pollock, and that's something else. Lyle Collins already has history with Frank Pollock, which I think has a decent factor of him coming to Cincinnati. He was coached by Pollock when he was in Dallas for several seasons. So he already has chemistry with that coach, which is great. Frank Pollock I know when you look at the offensive line, how many sacks we gave up last season, the offensive line was bad at times, but also when you look at the sacks, there are times it looks very, very deceiving. We know when, Mixon gives up a block or something like that, and that goes basically towards the offensive line or P-Ryan. But when you actually watch the games, I don't think the offensive line is as bad at times. But, that Super Bowl was horrendous, and obviously the Bengals have that on their mind. That's a big reason why, they upgraded the offensive line this week or two. Let's see here. I'm excited to see Hayden Hurst stretch some catches vertically with the mismatches he's going to draw with his speed. I think I briefly discussed Hurst signing last week, but I didn't get to really hear your thoughts on Hayden Hurst. What are your thoughts on them signing Hurst to a one-year deal?
Well, you know what? I think it's a wise idea because they got Hayden Hurst for half the money than they would have gotten Uzama for. And you're going to get equal or better production. Hurst is a first rounder, and we kind of forget about that. He got buried in Baltimore behind Andrews. He got buried with the Falcons behind Pitts. So he hasn't had a real solid shake at being the go-to guy for much of his career. And unless we draft a tight end very high, he's going to be the go-to tight end. He's athletic, he's long, and he's fast. And from what I've seen, he's got decent hands. I haven't really studied his tape or his career. But, it looks like we have a pretty solid weapon here, and he's so excited to be here, and he's got a chip on his shoulder towards the NFL in general because his career hasn't really panned out like he thought he would coming out of the first round. And he's also got a little bit of a chip against Baltimore, which is good, too, because, they're a big rival for us. We're going to play them twice a year. Can't you see Hurst getting like a game-winning red zone touchdown against the Ravens? I can almost see stuff like that coming. So, yeah. He's going to be exciting. He can stretch the field. He's just like a strong wide receiver, not a great blocker, but most of your tight end number ones aren't great blockers anymore. There's a few rare exceptions. They're mostly just glorified receivers. So I predict that he's going to have a very, very good year for us. And I do think that they need to figure out who's going to be the tight end 2 or 3. I know Sample's going to be there and he's going to be the blocking tight end. But you really need 2 good pass-catching tight ends. So that's either going to come from the draft or unless Thaddeus Moss, who I've been crossing my fingers on since he got here, that he can stay healthy and have some chemistry with Burrow. I don't know what the future is going to hold for him, but we need some of these guys to pan out. I know Scotty Washington is another one, a wide receiver who they asked him to bulk. I guess they felt he was a little bit too slow for a receiver. So they said, hey, you want to stick with the team, bulk up a little bit, we'll put you at tight end. Sometimes those things don't work out as well as you want. So I know we have Washington and Moss in the wings, but it's going to be Hurst and possibly a draft pick as your 1 and 2s. I can't wait to see how it plays out. And of course, injuries are going to be a factor too. Hurst had some injury problems in his career, but I'm hoping that those are behind him now. And like I said, he's excited to be here. He's got a chip on his shoulder against Baltimore. So I'm excited to have a guy like that.
And, the person who, commented that Ken Hamhock, I was actually, about to say, he commented here, 4 drops in 4 years by Hayden Hurst. That's very, very good. That's something you don't really see today in the NFL. Limited, the limited amount of drops, especially in 4 years. Some players have that in 1 season. But when you look at Hurst, to me, I'm just kind of surprised by it because it was another one of those signings like we didn't hear nothing about him. You kind of had a general idea if they went tight end. In my opinion, I thought they were like dead set on Jonah Everett. I really wanted Everett to come to Cincinnati. I was shocked it didn't happen. I saw he just signed with the Chargers there still go. I think that's a great signing for them. But Hayden Hurst with the 1 year, I don't hate the signing. I don't like that it's 1 year because I think we talked last week. This was before they signed Hayden Hurst. If they signed a tight end, whether it was Gerald Everett, whether it was Austin Hooper, even when he was released, whoever it may have been, we could possibly be in the same situation 1 year from now, but even worse because Hayden Hurst is not going to be a free agent. Andrew Sample is going to be a free agent. And we talked, I said they signed a tight end for a 1 year deal. I don't think it changes at all their philosophy towards drafting a tight end in the draft. I still think it's going to be probably in the 3rd round. I look at a guy like Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State. If he's there in the 3rd round, I think that's a very good chance he's their pick. But at the same time, I was calling Gerald Everett to Cincinnati pretty much a lock, and obviously we saw how that turned out. But, Hayden Hurst, he's not as good as a blocker as CJ Uzama, but he's a much, much better pass catcher. But I don't know if it's really an upgrade over Uzama, but I don't dislike it. I think it will be interesting. You mentioned him being a 1st-round pick and hasn't really lived up to his 1st-round pick potential. Maybe, he comes to Cincinnati, kind of redoes his career, kind of like how we've seen, Eli Apple. I believe Apple was a 1st-round pick. Didn't really pan out at all until he came to Cincinnati, and he's been pretty good with us so far. So who knows with Hurst? Interesting signing there. And another comment from I'm bringing Chili. Let's see here. What do you guys think Jonah Williams' ceiling is? He still isn't even close to his offensive tackle peak in terms of physicals and his knowledge of the game. I don't really know his ceiling, but I would 100% agree he's not even close to his peak because I don't think we've even seen remotely close to his peak yet. Like, I think Jonah Williams has potential to be a top 10, top maybe 12 left tackle, but we still haven't seen it. And I think I said this last week. Jonah Williams is far more injury prone than people realized. I know he did not miss a game this past season, but we're talking about a guy who missed 22 games his first 2 seasons. That is not good at all. And that was a big reason why I did not want us going out to Teron Armstead, especially with Williams. He would have to move the right tackle. But that's besides the point. But with Jonah Williams, I think he can maybe be, top 12, 15 left tackle. I don't think he's ever going to be like a Whitworth or someone like that, but I think maybe 10, 15, something like that. I think he's capable of that, but he has to put all the pieces together and stay healthy for him in order to do that.
Yeah, a couple of things with Jonah. Even when they first drafted him, I know he had a good college pedigree, very high draft pick, and again, he's a very intelligent, very likable guy. I just felt that he was undersized right from the jump, like coming out 6'4", barely 305. That weight goes down a little bit as the season goes. I just feel he's a little bit undersized as a left tackle. And that's why you're hearing rumors of, hey, maybe they'll move him to right tackle. Maybe they'll move him to guard. Maybe they'll move him to center. So the jury's still out on Jonah Williams. And I wish that wasn't the case. But one thing that I saw out of him last year was if you look at like the first drive or two of games, he really struggled. Like he would let up a sack pretty much early, a sack or a big time pressure pretty much early in a lot of the games. So I think he underestimates his opponents. I don't really know the mentality behind that. Or, you can watch a guy on tape. Like I'm saying, if I'm Jonah Williams, I'm watching who I'm playing that week on tape. You can watch a guy on tape. You can know his tendencies. You can know, hey, when he's lining up like this, he's going to want to do this. When his first twitch is this, he's going to want to do this. You can know all those things. But what you can't realize is someone's strength and speed until you witness it firsthand. And to go back to past history, that's how Geno Atkins was. If you look at Geno Atkins early in games, he would always like bust in on the first couple plays of the game and just destroy everything, blow things up. And that was because people saw him on tape and said, all right, this is what he does. This is who he is. But until you face that physical strength in person, you don't know what to expect. And I think that's been happening to Jonah Williams earlier in games where he's getting overwhelmed early. And then his intelligence and his pedigree and the coaching has him buckle down a little bit more as the games go by. Of course, not to say that he doesn't make mistakes later in the game, but from Jonah, I'm seeing more things early on. If you really watch what he's doing out there on a play-by-play basis, that's what I saw. But ceiling, I don't know. It's such a tough question. I'm just going to say that I believe that he is truly undersized for that position, which may not ever make him elite. And it's painful to say that.
I really like the point there you made. Early on in games, he gives up sacks and maybe underestimates his opponent. That's a great point there, because when you start thinking about that, it makes a lot of sense. Go back and look at the Chiefs game in the regular season when we basically won the AFC North that game. The offensive line against the Chiefs to start off the game was horrendous. As the game went on, it's gradually and slowly got better. And that's happened so many times this past season. Like, it could be the Burrow's first 3 drives and he already gets sacked 3 or 4 times. But as the game goes on, Pollock, does a great job, have getting the offensive line better in the second half. We've seen that so many times. But early on in games, it seems like that's when the offensive line really gets to its worst. Aside from the Super Bowl, a second half against the Rams, when you think of the majority of our sacks are first couple of drives, and after that we slowly get better. So definitely agree with your point there. So happy to see that we're finally spending more money from Matthew Haslam. The past couple of years, we've really, shut down the narrative that the Bengals do not spend money. I mean, we spent, I don't even know how much money this year. We spent a ton of money last year and even the year before, signing DJ Reader and the 2019 season. And then we also signed Trey Waynes that season as well. We're going to talk about that in just a second here. Tuning in from Florida, Houday from Flu Geeks parents. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrong. But thanks for tuning in and everything. And like I said, when you start looking at the money that the Bengals have spent these past couple of years, obviously, Collins is up on the list as most money. Trey Hendrickson is up on that list. DJ Reader, and like I said, Trey Waynes. We signed Trey Waynes and DJ Reader a couple of seasons ago at the same season. So what are your kind of thoughts on the Bengals releasing Trey Waynes? It was announced a couple of days ago. With this move, the Bengals will save $10.8 million by releasing Trey Waynes.
Yeah, and that's a big one. And to go back from what the person had just commented on as far as us spending money, just real quick. Yeah, if you look at the 2 prior years, we spent basically $200 million, mostly on the defensive side of the ball. And this year it was the offensive side of the ball's turn. And it's a pleasure to see because it's going to just make us stronger. We're going to have a great defense moving forward. Now we're going to protect Joe Burrow. The sky's the limit. And going on to Trey Waynes, you had to cut him. I mean, I think I broke down the numbers on my podcast that he made more money this year than Burrow and Chase combined. And in the Super Bowl, he was covering kicks. So it was really, I mean, that happens sometimes. You hit on guys. Eli Apple was a good value for his money. Hendrickson and Reader earned every penny of their contract. Awuzie, every penny. Hilton, every penny. Like those guys really panned out for the money. And, you're not going to hit on everybody. And in the case of Waynes, if he stayed healthy, we probably would have had a very productive corner out there, but he just couldn't stay healthy, barely played for us. And as I said, in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, you have this $11 million player covering kicks, or I think he was making like 13 or something. It was crazy money. So you knew that they had to do it. I had one inkling that maybe they'll try to bring him back at a lower price, but sometimes when you get burned like that, you don't want any part of that player anymore. Darius Phillips burnt us with the drop punts. Gone. We don't want any part of you anymore. Waynes, we paid you more money than Burrow was making, and you did nothing for us. Even if you're healthy, we're washing our hands of you as well. And I think that's going to free up money. I think we actually went through our whole available cap and maybe went over the cap a little bit on some of these recent signings. And getting rid of Waynes will bring us back where we could probably sign another guy or two, maybe mid-tier. And, totally worth it. And what we're seeing is we're signing our own guys, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit. But you always have to think about that. When you have, just as a round number, when you have $50 million, you're thinking, all right, who are we going to spend it on? Well, about $8 million is going to your draft picks, like we talked about. And, probably 10, 12 million is going to go to signing your own mid-tier guys. You need your punter, you need your long snapper, you need your special teams guy. You have to fill your roster with 53 guys. It just can't be all top heavy. So anyway, the release of Waynes frees us up to do some of those things as well.
When you look at Trey Waynes, like I said, saves $10.8 million. He made $31 million with the Bengals in 2 seasons. He played 243 snaps. That is over $127,000 per snap he played with the Bengals. When you look at bust or worst signings or whatever, I think this has to go down as the worst signing in Bengals franchise history. I really don't even know what would come close. Obviously, like you said, you're not always going to hit on picks, but like if it's somebody like, I don't know, like you get a 1-year deal from somebody like Eli Apple, he might be horrible, but it's not like you're spending like a money on a 1-year guy, like a $1 million. It's not like you paid top dollar for him. We paid top dollar for Trey Waynes. We paid Trey Waynes $2 more million than what Kirkpatrick was on his contract at the time. We thought that was kind of bad. So Trey Waynes, it was overpaid from the start. It just did not make sense why we gave him so much money. I understand, we want to get better, but obviously he's not going to turn down that price range. And then he doesn't play at all his first season with us. It was just a disaster from the start. I'm really, really glad we ended up releasing him. I will say I was getting a tad bit nervous that we were going to keep him because I was surprised it took us this long to release him. I was getting a little bit nervous there, but I'm glad, we saved like about $11 million. And like you said, that can kind of go towards some of our own guys. We've already signed a couple of our own guys these past couple of days, and we might sign more. Let's see here. Ken Hammock, do you believe we would bring back Trey Flowers? He was back. He was good at holding tight ends in check. I wouldn't be surprised if we brought him back for maybe like a 1-year deal, kind of a depth signing there. We've already seen it with a couple of signings these past couple of days. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we brought Flowers back maybe 1 or 2 year deal.
Yeah, 100%. I went through the list of our free agents that are our own guys that were going to become free agents. And I picked, these are the guys that I think we should retain. And Flowers is on that list because I think you can get him for maybe $3 million. I think, I don't know. I'm not his agent, but he's kind of on the scrap heap, and it's not like he's in demand from a lot of teams. So, and no one's made him an offer yet. So I think trying to bring him back at $3 million is an excellent idea, Ken. And to have him cover tight ends, he was really doing well in that role. Wasn't flawless, but how can you be flawless when you're covering, Kelsey and Andrews? But I think he did pretty well in that role, and I'd like to see him back because he did start at corner for the Seahawks for a while, and you can never have enough good corners. And yeah, without a doubt, I hope they can find the money to bring him back because they really did carve a unique and productive role for him.
He also comments here, Flowers can play safety as well like he did in college. And he also says that was a time when Cincinnati had to overpay to bring in talent, which, yes, I do agree with that. I was talking today on another video with someone, and we were talking about, the Jaguars. The Jaguars spent so much money, but it was to the point like when you have a crappy organization and a team that's not a big market and a team that has struggled to win these past several years, you kind of do have to overpay talent just to come to your team. Like there has to be something that intrigues a player to come to your town and city that's a low market, has not used to winning, and you kind of have to overpay him. So yeah, I get that. That was definitely time when the Bengals did have to overpay players, but now that is not seem the case at all. When we got Lyle Collins to a 3-year deal, the first 2 years is $20 million, which is a really steal for us. But we're talking about the offensive line so far. We talked about, Trey Waynes getting released. And, we were going to talk about this later. We'll go ahead and talk about it now. You said you want to talk about it. Left guard. That seems to be like the main issue right now. It's very up in the air, in my opinion. When you look at Jackson Carman, I feel like he has potential, but I don't know if we should be ready enough to give him a starting job yet. I think it's very, very risky. You do not want to have a 4 good offensive linemen and 1 question mark offensive lineman. I think the safe decision, we're bringing back Quentin Spain, maybe to a 1-year deal, because like I said earlier, I think Spain is underrated. He's better than people give him credit for. And if it's a 1-year deal, maybe 1 year from now, we're looking at it, maybe Carmen's ready to be the starter at left guard. Maybe he's been mentored by Spain and some of these other guys, and he's been ready. He's been great in practice. He's going to call out to be the starting left guard. But to me, in my opinion, I kind of think it would be smart to stay with Quentin Spain. He was the best offensive lineman this past season, in my opinion. And I don't think you want to get rid of him I don't think you should get rid of him if you don't have to. You should always try to make your team the best it could possibly be. And we're talking about left guard. I think Quentin Spain would be much better right now than Jackson Carman at left guard.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities right now, and I agree with you. I don't know if Carman's quite ready for that yet. What he has in his favor is he's so strong, and that's going to be valuable for him down the road. But he's not picking up stunts the way he should be. There's you saw there was a lot of issues with him. He was part of that porous offensive line last year, and it's just hard to say. You revamped your whole line, but you're going to have one guy who is possibly a liability. I hope not. I hope he grows from year one. But teams are going to go after that. And there's a lot of good defensive tackles in our division and in this league. And they can easily target a guy like that and still make life miserable for Burrow. If you have a running back chipping and you give him help with the center, all that aside, it's hard to protect. The theory is you can protect one bad offensive lineman, but in reality, it's the dam's going to break on that. So going back to Quentin Spain, I do agree with you on him. And I felt he was our best offensive lineman last year, and I felt he was our best offensive lineman the year before. So I think he warrants a shot. He wants to come back. He's going to come in at a low price. So that's someone that you want to consider for this. I saw a couple, like you forget about all the individual plays when the season goes by, but they were showing a replay of a game against the Ravens and Calais Campbell. And it was the first play of the game, and Campbell just buries Spain, puts him on his back on the first play of the game. Burrow somehow Houdini's out of it and throws for a first down on the play. I don't know if you or anybody remembers that. I just happened to see it recently. But I'm reminded of certain things like that. I don't want to see anything like that happen with our offensive line at any point. So even though Spain has played well for us, the jury's kind of out on him as well. Spain, Jackson, they don't seem like the permanent fix right there. I'm hoping that Spain plays like he did, and I'm hoping that Carman gets better, and those are possibilities. But I'm thinking that maybe the draft is someplace to get that left guard. There's a lot of possibilities here. I don't want to just say we got these three free agent offensive linemen and the line is done. I think that you need to still attack that in the draft high, and maybe you get lucky and get one of those marquee guards, and that's a guy that you can plug in. Because remember, Carmen's coming off back surgery. He was coming off that coming out of college. He was a left tackle. They moved him to right guard. It just has so many question marks around it that I wouldn't mind saying, you know what, maybe this pick didn't work out. Maybe he is just going to be a backup for us, and let's try again. They have that luxury in this draft. It's not like they have to fill a whole bunch of positions. You can target maybe left guard, tight end, and some other and best player available. But there's a lot of options. Plus, all the guys that played last year are going to be hungry to try to get a starting spot there. I don't know if any of them really warrant a starting spot. But either way, I think maybe our left guard comes from the draft. I'm not opposed to bringing Spain back, despite that play against Campbell and despite the last play of the Super Bowl, which we know he was the one who got beat when Chase is streaking down the sideline to almost make history for us. And the last thing I want to say on this is it's not just about 5 linemen. You need 6. You need 7, really. But if you go into the season with 5 starting linemen, there's a very good chance that one of those guys is not going to play all the games or go on IR. You have to be prepared for that. If you go in with 4 good guys, you're in real trouble. You go in with 5 good guys, you're one injury away from having Isaiah Prince at right tackle now, and we're back in the same boat. And it's no disrespect to Isaiah Prince. He was thrown into the mix. He was a little bit over his head. He didn't expect to be in that position. I can go off on the line and on the backups and that whole mentality. But the reality is we're not done with the offensive line. I say you grab 2 in the draft, someone to fight at left guard and someone to back everybody up. And maybe that's Jackson Carman, or maybe that's someone else that's not here just yet.
And, when I look at Spain, it's just, I don't know. I'm not sold on Carman. He's had his moments. He's shown potential, but other times he just doesn't look that great. But obviously, what you really expect from a guy who's coming, a rookie, who's coming off of back surgery. But you don't really want to have that, outlier on your offensive line. You don't want to have Williams and these 3 guys who are really good, and then you have that left guard and Carman. And I think Carman can be good, but I just feel like I think it's too risky to have Carman start, especially like you said. Spain's been our best offensive lineman this past 2 years, and to let him go for a rookie who's still a major question mark, I think is extremely risky. You also mentioned, in the draft. I'm not going to lie, I'm very hesitant for the Bengals to draft the offensive lineman early. When you look throughout the years, I know this. Thinking or philosophy might be kind of dumb because in that case you would never draft one. But if I'm the Bengals, I'm very hesitant to draft offensive line because look at how many offensive linemen we've had that we just have not been able to develop this past decade. I know Boyke and Jake Fisher have been years and years ago, but when you look at those guys were complete bust and did not amount to nearly as big as the expectations we thought they were going to be. Billy Price never lived up to the hype. Jackson Carman, he's only played a year, but I don't know. It's still a major question mark on him. And I know some people can say, well, we drafted Whitworth. That was like 15, 17 years ago. We drafted Zeitler and Bowling. Those were 10-plus years ago. When you go down the list, the last time the Bengals have drafted a good offensive lineman, you're looking at like 9, 10 years ago. And that's like when Dalton was like a rookie, Green was a rookie. I know that I can understand why people say it doesn't make sense because in that case you would never draft one then. But I don't know. Frank Pollock is a much better offensive line coach than some we've had in recent years. Much better than Turner, obviously, and he's definitely capable of getting the best out of your offensive lineman. but I'm still kind of hesitant to drafting an offensive lineman early. I have no issue drafting one maybe like the third, fourth, or fifth round, but the first round, I'm kind of more so best player available. If that is an offensive lineman, I would be much more maybe towards that. But I'm not really for drafting an offensive lineman in the first round unless it's dead set. That's clearly the best player available type of deal. But I feel like Smanny would probably be the best option at left guard in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the jury's out. Any rookie that comes in, you don't know what you're going to get with them, and we haven't had a great track history of developing rookies. And I was having a conversation. I don't know if it was with you, but it was with someone recently that, when you have like wide receivers and running backs, those guys can come into the league right away. They have fresh legs, all the speed in the world, and really contribute right away. When you get in the trenches, sometimes it takes guys a little bit longer for their bodies to mature and to be in there and fighting and get stronger. And so, yeah, I'm going to agree with you. It's hard to just plug in a rookie offensive lineman and expect him to be a stopgap. And for that reason, you know what? Let's go with best player available in the draft, because you can't go wrong doing that, regardless of position.
And when you mentioned, wide receivers, look at Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, two, rookie, breakers and, yards and stuff like that these past couple of years. Like you said, it's a lot easier for these running backs and wide receivers. Look at Quentin Nelson for the Colts. I think when you look at offensive linemen, who have phenomenal seasons, you can only pick a handful of guys who that rookie offensive lineman, he was great from the very start. You can't say that about many offensive linemen, I wouldn't think. But like Quentin Nelson, Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell, some of those guys were very good this past year. But wide receivers and running backs, like you're saying, it's a lot more likely those guys have great rookie years than offensive linemen, because they may have to develop more. And kind of speaking of offensive linemen, staying on the topic, a different topic here, but still in the offensive line. It was announced the Bengals signed Fred Johnson to a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. But then it was announced they released him. We kind of talked about this before the show. When you think about it, that's kind of stupid. Why would you, cut him after you signed him? It's actually very, very smart, because the Bengals signed Fred Johnson as an insurance policy if they struck out on Lyle Collins. Clearly, obviously, we hit a home run with Collins. We signed him to a 3-year deal on Sunday, and he will be a right tackle for a couple more years. So then, after that, obviously, the Bengals, release Fred Johnson. It makes a lot of sense, because if we struck out on Collins, we had, Fred Johnson, a guy, kind of how you're talking about, a guy who can kind of play in multiple positions. If somebody goes down, he can go in there, maybe fill a right tackle or something like that. But we release him due to us having Lyle Collins not right tackle. There's not really that need for Fred Johnson on the roster now. So what are your kind of thoughts on the Bengals releasing Johnson?
Yeah, when they re-signed him for $2.4 million, I was shocked. I just thought that was a little bit high. And I know in comparison, that's not a lot of money compared to what starters get in the league. But I was just surprised, because he was inactive for a large chunk of the games last year, and it was surprising at the time. So, yeah, the fact that they did sign Collins made him more expendable. And like we talked about, Jordan, maybe they'll bring him back for a smaller price tag if no one else wants him around the league. But, yeah, it makes sense. And plus, we ended up spending more money than we thought. We didn't know we were going to, we got the first 2 offensive linemen, and we got Hurst. We re-signed some of our own. We kind of thought we were done, and then we had to make room for Collins. So some sacrifices had to be made to do that. And Fred Johnson is one of those sacrifices.
And, Fred Johnson, like I said, we did re-sign him, but then we released him. But somebody else we did re-sign was wide receiver Stanley Morgan to a 2-year deal. I like this move quite a bit. Stanley Morgan is never going to be one of those guys who have many catches, but he's one of those guys who is one of the better special teams players in their team. He's a really good blocker. He's one of those guys when you look at a stat sheet, he's not going to buy you with a stat sheet at all. But when you actually watch the Bengals play, he's a guy, that's a great block, or that's a great, whatever by, Stanley Morgan. So I feel like signing Morgan to a 2-year deal is really smart by the Bengals. Like I said, he's not a top tier name, but he's just somebody who you can go in there, and 9 times out of 10, he's going to do his job correctly. And if he needs to step up, he's one of those guys, if there's a moment he can, live up to and have a great block at that moment. But Morgan signs a 2-year deal. I think that's a great move by Cincinnati.
I love the move. And again, I told you I made that short list of guys I wanted to bring back. He was at the top of the list. Now, when we look at how like training camp goes every year and you have like 8 wide receivers battling for the job, you always get attracted to the guys that are pass catchers. Obviously, that's the position of wide receiver. But I've seen sometimes where they've had roster scrums that you're just following the back end of the wide receiver roster, waiting for these guys to make it, who's going to make it, who's not going to make it. And then the one guy makes it and he gets like 5 receptions the whole year. So a lot of times when you fill your 6th wide receiver, or if you carry 7, that 6th or 7th guy, if you can use him on special teams like Stanley Morgan, he's an outstanding gunner. And when he was they had him in there blocking a lot. It telegraphed it a little bit. Like a lot of times when teams saw him in there going in motion, they figured it was going to be a run play, but it was still very effective. He was a more effective blocker than Auden Tate because he kind of filled the Auden Tate role when Tate went down as far as blocking. And to have someone like that aboard, I've said it on my podcast, I think he's going to be a Bengal for like 5, 6, 7 years, like almost like Matthew Slater from the Patriots. And I'm not comparing him to Slater, who's a potential Hall of Famer just yet. But Stanley Morgan shows some outstanding game. Great gunner, great blocker, great team guy. I don't know how much they got him for. I saw it was a 2-year deal. I didn't see the price. I don't know if you have that, Jordan, but I think it was a steal and a no-brainer to bring him back.
Yeah, I haven't seen the price, but I don't think it would be much. Maybe like $2 million per season or something like that, which is very doable for a guy who's one of the better gunners in the league. And you mentioned Auden Tate. And we kind of talked about earlier what we would do at tight end number 2 here. Do you think, in your opinion, I don't think it will happen because it just kind of seemed like there's a disconnect from Tate in the Bengals. There was rumors a year or so ago Tate's agent was looking to possibly look for Auden Tate in the trade to get out of Cincinnati. But do you think the Bengals should maybe bring back Auden Tate to a 1-year deal and put him at tight end? I know Bengal fans have talked about this for years, but I feel like now is if it would happen, now was the most likely for it to happen. I don't think it's ever should have been, but there's a case where I feel like now is the best chance for it. You think Tate should come back for Cincinnati and try to attempt to play tight end?
I think there's something going on, like you said, with that relationship. I don't know if it was what his agent said a year ago or whatnot. They just never used him the way they could have or should have. And I don't know if they just see things in practice where they just don't feel that he's the guy. And I know it's when you think he's a big guy, maybe he can bulk up his body like a Scotty Washington. But the fact that they haven't asked him to do that means they probably don't want to retain the person, Auden Tate, player or person. It just doesn't feel like they want the person on the team. Because like I said, they never targeted him. Even when he was healthy, he only had a couple catches this past season. One of them was a touchdown from Brandon Allen in junk time. And I was just so amazed how underutilized he was. So no, it sounds like a good idea, but maybe there's something in his body style that doesn't lend to throwing on 20, 30 extra pounds and becoming a tight end. It's just, it's a creative thought, and I respect whoever has those thoughts, but I just don't think that it's going to happen. He's going to go elsewhere, and I'm surprised he hasn't had any interest yet from other teams.
Like, I would love the idea. Up to this point, I've not really been that big of a fan of it, but right now, I've probably been more of a fan of it than ever. Auden Tate is one of those guys who is one of those fan favorites and who just never plays. And Bengal fans know his potential that we've seen. He might, like we talked about earlier with Stanley Morgan, when he's on the field, he makes the most of his opportunities. When Auden Tate's on the field, he makes the most of his opportunities. But for whatever reason, he just does not play. I would love it, but I mean, I just do not think that will end up happening. Tate coming back, like I said, I feel like there's just some weird disconnect there. Even going back from last season. But as we see here, something interesting happened kind of last week. When you look at the Bengals players who have signed elsewhere, obviously we saw Darius Phillips sign with the Raiders. There's a couple other Bengal players who signed elsewhere. One of them in particular was Larry Ogunjobi. He signed a 3-year deal with Chicago for $40 million. And heading into this offseason, it was pretty much evident that the Bengals were going to sign B.J. Hill or Larry Ogunjobi. It would have been very, very difficult for both of those guys to re-sign with Cincinnati. Bengal fans have been talking about it, and I'm definitely on board for it. Do you think the Bengals should try to go back after Ogunjobi and sign him to another contract?
1,000,000,000%. I was so sorry to see him go, and it's a bad break for him because he really got the contract that he deserved. That $13 million a year, maybe a little bit high. But I was like, you know what? I wanted him back, but the Bears are really taking care of this guy. And, his ship has finally come in. He's finally getting recognized financially. And then, he fails the physical. But what do you expect? Like, he broke his foot I think it was in the playoffs, right? Like, early in the playoffs. It's hard to pass a physical when you're only a month or two removed from a broken foot. Now, the only thing that would make me not want to bring him back is if it was a Liz Frank injury, because sometimes those can be career threatening. I don't think it was in his case, but it's just like Chicago, you knew he just broke his foot. Of course, he's not going to pass a physical. That you shouldn't have even chased him and went through this if that was going to be an issue. You should have been a little more patient. But if that's their mistake and that's potentially our gain, let the whole league sleep on him. Let him be the guy out there that failed the physical and no one wants to touch him. Because I was saying this the other day too. Maybe not even right now. Maybe like August comes and he's unsigned and he comes at a lower price, or even, God forbid in his case, September comes and he's still on the couch because no one wants him. I mean, that's a perfect guy to bring back at a bargain price if that's the case. And I would like to give him his fair due because he contributed a lot to our Super Bowl run this year. But you want to try to save as much money as you can, especially with all the money we spent on the line. We can't be giving Ogunjobi I think we gave him $6 or $8 million last year. I think that's even a little bit too high of a price tag right now based on our current spending. But yeah, please bring him back. That would make the offseason complete if we can find a way to trick everyone and bring Larry Ogunjobi back.
I remember it might have been last week or the week prior. You were talking about you liked Hill and Ogunjobi, but you preferred Ogunjobi over BJ Hill a little bit. Which, I mean, Ogunjobi, he was very underrated with us past season. The playoff game was the Raiders. He broke his foot in. And from the get-go, with signing with the Bears, that just did not make any sense. I mean, Ogunjobi was good this past season. I don't think he's worth $13 million. Like, to me, that's kind of crazy. I thought he was going to get maybe like close to half of that, a little over half, kind of like this past season where we signed him to 1 year for $6 million. But like you're saying, it would. Like, what do you expect? He's probably not going to pass physical. I mean, he just had a broken foot 2 months ago. But, I mean, we have a possible chance to get a tremendous upgrade of the offensive line, possibly bring Spain back. I mean, Spain best offensive lineman last year, and now it's probably like third, maybe. Like, it's crazy. Now you look at their defensive line, being able to bring everybody back. Plus, you add on Joseph Asai, who had shown so much potential in preseason. And I'm not trying to be biased, but, I mean, it's crazy. Like, the Bengals are one of the favorites to not in the NFC, but in the NFL in general. When you have Burrow just had his first full season and led us to a Super Bowl. If we get Ogunjobi back with BJ Hill, like, that is insane. Because both of those guys, kind of like how we talked about with some other players, like, they are really good and far better than the stat sheet show. Like, BJ Hill and Ogunjobi, they, clear some holes for some other guys, to make a tackle. They'll get some sacks, tackles for loss, pass deflections. Both of those guys are very, very underrated. I mean, plus we have, DJ Reader. It's one of the better nose tackles in the league. And it's crazy that everything is going our way. All these signings we've made, whether it's Ted, Karras, Alex Kappa, Lyle Collins, Bengal fans are still rejoicing over. We still have a chance, if we want, possibly to sign Larry Ogunjobi and, Quentin Spain. And I really don't know how much money we have at the moment. I think maybe around $11 million. I might be wrong. But Quentin Spain, I wouldn't be surprised if he signed for like 1 year for like 5 or 6, or maybe 2 for 10 or 12, something like that. Larry Ogunjobi, kind of the same boat. But when you look at those two guys, we would be probably about over the cap. That's before the draft. So that would be kind of hard. I know if we were to cut some GP Ryan, that would save about $2 million there. I would love to bring both of those guys back. I mean, that would help us out so freaking much. But I just don't know if we'll be able to. I would love to bring Ogunjobi back. I mean, like you said, there was times this past season he was better than BJ Hill. I mean, we saw how great BJ Hill was this past season. Ogunjobi bringing him back on defense, and that would be insane.
Yeah, 100%. And if you think about the big narrative in the last offseason was Tampa Bay wins the Super Bowl, and then they bring back all 22 guys, right? And everyone's thinking they're going to repeat. If you think of what the Bengals did, although we didn't win the Super Bowl, almost, let's be real, we brought back almost everybody, and we got improvements at several positions. So I think we did one step better than the Buccaneers, and we saw the Buccaneers fell short of the Super Bowl this year. And I think the Bengals have a very legitimate chance at going back. Nothing's easy. Anything can happen. Injuries can happen. Guys from other teams can excel. You have to go through Mahomes. You have to go through Josh Allen. You got to get through your own division, which is a very physical division. The Chargers are improved. You know, there's so many things out there to worry about, and it's hard to repeat. But we did everything we could at this point to put us in position to repeat as AFC champions.
I think your internet might have be messed up or something. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. You cut out there towards the end. I couldn't really hear what you were saying. But
I think that it's doing it on purpose. Whenever I'm rambling on a point, it finds a way to say, all right, Frank, that's good. We got your point. But my point is that we've done everything we can to get back to the Super Bowl. So even though there's a big gauntlet out there, we have a very legitimate shot of going back again.
I tell you what it is. It's probably ESPN. They hate talking. They hate hearing good stuff about the Bengals, and we're talking good stuff about the Bengals, and they just block it and start talking about the Steelers. But when you look at this offensive line, like obviously Jonah Williams is going to be left tackle. Let's assume Quentin Spain will be left guard, center, right guard, and right tackle. Trey Hopkins this past season had a 51.4 PFF grade. Ted Karras, bringing him from New England, 72.8. Over 20 grade difference. Adeniji, right guard, 48.3. You're bringing Alex Kappa, 74.2. That's over 25 difference. Isaiah Prince at right tackle, going to Lyle Collins. Prince was 58. Collins was 82. That's a 24 difference. 3 different players on the offensive line. You get a 20% upgrade PFF, 3 different positions. With your worst group, and the guy you might bring back was your best offensive lineman this season. I'm not trying to be biased, but when it's crazy because when you look at the Bengals, some of these teams have gotten better, but the Bengals' only glaring hole this past year obviously was the offensive line. And we can still get some upgrades maybe in the drafts or such. But Hayden Hurst, he's not as good as a blocker as C.J. Uzomah, but he's a far better pass catcher than C.J. Uzomah. You get these 3 offensive linemen. There's a reason why the Bengals were in a Super Bowl this past year when you have Joe Burrow. And when you get this offensive line that is a billion times better, one of the best offensive lines I've seen in the Bengals' memory and forever, probably might be the best offensive line we've seen in a very, very long time in Cincinnati. But yet some people are talking about, the Chargers, the Chiefs, or the Broncos. All those teams are really, really good. But it's so weird to me when you look at the Bengals and the Rams, the 2 teams who won the Super Bowl this past season have been some of the most disrespected teams in this offseason. Nobody's talking about the Rams being in the Super Bowl, or the Buccaneers, or the Packers. Packers will not be in the Super Bowl. That's a guarantee. The Buccaneers, they might be, but people are really disrespecting the Rams. People are disrespecting the Bengals. Some people are saying we won't even win the division. I know Desean Watson coming to Cleveland, that's a huge, major, get for them. He's obviously a major upgrade over Baker Mayfield. But the fact that some people say we won't even win the division, some people keep doubting us. I know people say, why not us, and just prove the doubters wrong. But there gets to be a point, like, we were in the freaking Super Bowl this past season, and still people doubt us. Like, are you kidding me? We have the best offensive line group in the AFC North. We have a very underrated defense. Oh, I'm getting pumped up and excited about it right now. I'm feeling like I'm about to go on a rant or something. But, I mean, when you look at this Bengals team, there's no reason we shouldn't be being the AFC Championship this year in the Super Bowl. We have the talent. This is the most talented roster we've seen in a very long time. I am so freaking excited to watch the Bengals this season.
Yeah, I can't wait. And to see Joe, we saw what Joe Burrow did last year, and that was really Brady-like. Now, just imagine if he has a little bit more time to throw. and takes a lot less of a beating, it's going to be scary how he's going to dissect these defenses. I just cannot wait. It's going to be a great season. And I'm not just being a Bengals homer or Bengals optimist. If you just look at the facts, it's going to be a great season.
And, when you look at the Bengals, the additions they've made these past couple of weeks, it has been tremendous, and it's not being talked about enough. But when you look around the AFC North, the Steelers, they signed James Daniels. They also signed Trubisky to a 2-year deal. They signed, Baltimore signed Marcus Williams, a safety from the Saints. Like I said, Cleveland got Desean Watson. They also traded basically pocket change to get Amari Cooper. This AFC North is better than the last season, I will say that, but I think it still belongs to the Bengals. When I kind of talked about this earlier with somebody who was a Browns fan. We were talking about ranking the AFC North teams. If you were to rank these AFC North teams as we head into the 2022 season, what would be your order throughout the AFC North teams?
Obviously, Bengals first, Browns would be second, Ravens would be third, Steelers would be fourth. But they're all dangerous in their own right. Like, the Steelers have Myles Jack now. I know they're going to use him properly. Like, they couldn't use him properly down in Jacksonville. So they're always a threat, even though their offense is going to be compromised. They don't have a line. I still don't think they have a quarterback. So they're not going to be a big scoring team, but they're a team that can do a number on you defensively. I'd like to say the Steelers do play a little bit dirty, so you just never know. Late hit on Burrow. Anything can happen. So, the Ravens are traditionally pretty solid in the trenches. Lamar Jackson's a big wild card. He's tough. He can win games by himself. And Cleveland, we have a problem with. We had a problem with them last year. I'm hoping that that's correctable, but they seem to have our number in the trenches, and we have a rough time with that running game. So even though we are the best team in the league, Cleveland's going to be tough for us to get by on a head-to-head basis just based on last year. I still think we have the edge, but that's the team I'm most worried about. And to go back, I know we didn't really talk about the Desean Watson trade, but they gave up a lot to get him. And I know he could be a game changer for them and maybe the missing piece that they need to go to the next level. I hope not. I hope that he's rusty. I hope that Hendrickson gets a real good pop on him to teach him a little bit of a lesson and, whatever. But I'm thinking that by them giving away 3 first-rounders, a second-rounder, a third, a fourth, 6 or 8 draft picks, that's trouble because that hurts you. Maybe not in the short term. Maybe they're going to be fine because Chubb is still going to be healthy and, Myles Garrett's still going to be great and Deshaun Watson's probably going to show up. So in the short term, they might be like, yeah, great trade. But, as the years stack up and not having some of those draft picks can really hurt you. And I'm hoping that it does. I'm hoping that the Browns mortgage their future. And I'm hoping that Deshaun Watson comes back down to earth and can't touch someone like a Joe Burrow.
When you look at Watson coming to Cleveland, obviously the only reason he came to Cleveland was the, money, the fully guaranteed money. That was the only reason he came to the Browns. But I still don't know why you want to go to the Browns to win a Super Bowl. The Browns do not have a bad roster, but it's the fact that when you're in the AFC North, every game is a tough game. I mean, we were in the Super Bowl, and we got swept by the Browns, like you're saying. And, I mean, the AFC North, I've said it for so many years, is easily the most underrated division in the NFL, year after year after year. And when you look at these teams, every single team has not really declined. They pretty much only got better for the most part. You said your rankings, yours was the Bengals, Browns, Ravens, and Steelers. That was the same as the person I was talking to earlier. Mine would probably be, obviously the Bengals number 1. The Browns, I feel like them letting go J.C. Treader, that could cause them some issues down the road throughout the season. But the Bengals, Browns, I want to say Steelers and then Ravens. These past couple of years, I really doubted the Steelers. And heading into the 2020 season, I thought they'd be last in the AFC North. They won the division that season. This past season, I thought they'd be last in the AFC North. They made the playoffs with Roethlisberger without a doubt the worst season of his career. And I don't want to talk good about the Steelers. I don't like to. It's not fun to do, but I have to admit, they're one of those teams you can never, ever, ever count them out because they will always prove you wrong. And when you look at the Steelers, they were only half a game this past season for winning the AFC North. That is insane. It feels like that isn't really talked about much. And Mitchell Trubisky signing with the Steelers, to me, obviously Trubisky's and maybe he's average. But I feel like Trubisky is capable of playing just as good as Roethlisberger this past year, maybe even better. So if that's the case, I feel like that's a win for the Steelers. You just need average quarterback play, and they're capable of winning the AFC North with that tremendous defense. As for the Ravens, I'm not sold on them at all. Apparently, I don't know if you knew this or not, the Ravens were like the only team to have injuries this past year because Ravens fans never shut up about how Baltimore was hurt this past season. Oh, well, we killed the Ravens both games. Oh, we were hurt. You don't hear that from any other team except Baltimore. I mean, they will never shut up about their injuries this past year. I'm just not sold on them, not sold on Jackson. I don't think he's as good as people think. Their defense, I will say, at times kind of worries me, especially with them getting Marcus Williams. That was a really nice signing from New Orleans, and I believe a 4 or 5 year deal. But I don't know. I still think the division belongs to the Bengals, but it's going to be very interesting because somehow this division is better than last year, which is very hard to say when, I mean, all these teams were in playoff contention the whole season. But it's going to be really, really fun to watch the Bengals, the AFC North. You know, any kind of final thoughts as we kind of close it out on this video?
No, just going back to Trubisky with the Steelers, the one thing that he is going to bring is he's very good with his legs, and that's what Pittsburgh's been missing. Like, I don't think Roethlisberger had a run of like longer than 5 or 6 yards. There was some really weird stat out there, and that could really hurt your team because we're seeing in this new NFL, or, you know, the NFL of today, that quarterbacks get it done a lot. I think even Joe Burrow scrambling for some key first downs in key games. You see Mahomes does it. Lamar Jackson's very successful. Josh Allen, think about him. He's good for 40, 50 yards a game. So that was a missing element to the Steelers' offense. So that's going to make them more dangerous. And I agree that they're probably going to be better with Trubisky than with the end of his career shot elbow Roethlisberger. So final thoughts are, I'm so happy at what this team has done, and I just can't wait to see where we go from here because it's totally up.
It's one of the situations where, like, I mean, you never thought the Bengals would be in the Super Bowl this early, and then they have one of the best free agencies offseason they've ever had, and it just all comes together on the perfect timing. I feel like this could be the year. I don't want to be biased. I don't want to get my hopes up. But when you start looking at this, you know, roster, it's capable of beating any single team in the NFL. You know, we've kind of talked about Trae Waynes being released, Lyle Collins signing with the Bengals, and a huge deal for the Bengals. I mean, that's going to help us out so much. What they should do at right guard, kind of been answering, you know, some questions here from, you know, followers, subscribers, and everything. Kind of talk about this offensive line, ranking the AFC North, and a bunch of other stuff. So, Frank, can you kind of tell some of my listeners when they follow you on social media?
Yes, the name of my podcast is called The Unofficial Bengals Podcast, and you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Cincy Bengals Pod.
Yeah, I'll definitely put a link in the description below so people can check out your content. Some very underrated content. You know, make sure to go follow him on Instagram, Cincy Bengals Pod, one of the best Bengal pages on Instagram. Should definitely have more followers. You all need to follow him as soon as you're done watching this video. That about does it, you know, for this video. Follow me on Instagram, the Sports Dude Hines Show, and also on Twitter, S Dude Hines Show. If you're new to the channel or if you've seen my videos before, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I would really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hines Show.